Hey everybody, I want to talk about Dune a little bit. Sorry about all the banging, by the way. We've got people like working on the roof above us. Just pretend like it's a Harkonnen invasion. Coming down to like suppress me, I guess. Maybe I'm the chosen one. Maybe you should give me money on Patreon to find out. I don't know why that would help you find out, but it couldn't hurt me if you did that. So Dune Part 1 and 2, they are a nerdgasm, the likes of which has not really been seen in blockbuster science fiction for a long time. Like when Frank Herbert's original Dune novel came out, popular science fiction was kind of the science of science fiction was really emphasized the most out of those two words. It was all about exploring the intricacies of bizarre alien worlds and cultures. Maybe like a bit more than like concise storytelling or three-dimensional characters or any of that stuff. Like I don't really remember the plot of Isaac Asimov's The Gods Themselves. But I sure do remember a lot about how the soft-bodied parallel universe aliens with three genders have sex, masturbate, and procreate. Pretty sweet book, actually. Star Wars is maybe the biggest culprit in jump-starting a sea change that led to what we have now, where it often feels like science fiction is really more about putting relatable people who feel familiar to us in space, where the main purpose of the world building is to just give us like lasers and robots that look cool while they kill things. You can see this change really even in Star Wars itself. Star Wars spends most of its time on hot young people becoming friends, falling in love, and kicking ass. But George Lucas' Star Wars was always gawking at some new creature, planet, or spaceship in every single scene, even if it wasn't digging deep into the lore behind how it all worked the way like 50s and 60s science fiction did. And here in the present, Disney Star Wars stuff kind of never does that. The world is often really more like a backdrop than a selling point, which has always been baffling to me. But, where the modern sci-fi blockbuster seeks to simplify and streamline, Dune complicates at every turn. The characters in Dune have to do these goofy walks across the sands to keep from getting eaten by sandworms, which can sense rhythmic movement of normal footsteps, and they have devices that can intentionally lure them to some particular location. There is a fat man who has a belt or something that lets him fly, which at first is just a cool aesthetic image, but then becomes the reason he's able to survive a cloud of poison gas shooting out of a guy's fake tooth, along with the body shield he and every politically important person wears, which can deflect harmful projectiles, but aren't so good at deflecting slow-moving stuff. There are bagpipes and spider pets, a secretive order of psychic women. Even the obligatory chosen one prophecy surrounding the main character is wrapped up in like three or four layers of deception, self-deception, radicalization, and court intrigue. And I feel like Part 2 is a much better introduction to this world because of Chani, mostly. Chaney. I don't remember how they pronounced it in the actual movie, and Googling it just brings up old internet arguments from before the recent movies. I'm just going to say Chani. The relationship between Timothée Chalamet's Paul and Zendaya's Chani is the backbone of Dune 2. I love how before we get too deep into the intricacies of all the world building, a lot of the first few scenes are just of Paul and Chani getting to know each other. There's one moment in particular that's just so striking in its simplicity, where Chani is trying to like teach Paul how to do some kind of sand shit, and Paul gets distracted because he's so smitten with her that he just starts staring. And you get the sense that he's not just smitten by her beauty, but by how just friggin' awesome she is. And then Chani notices him looking at her, smiles, and she's like, stop. And it's one of the most romantic little story beats I have seen in a long time, at least in a blockbuster. It's such simple storytelling 101 stuff, but in a story as complex as Dune, it goes a long way towards making this Wikipedia page of lore feel human and urgent. Just about every big cosmic struggle or philosophical dilemma is made to feel important because of how it affects their partnership. It also really helps that Paul and Chani, and I guess just all of the Fremen people in general, are quite a bit more expressive than the more formal House Atreides, where most of Dune 1 takes place. I found myself wishing that I had watched Dune Part 2 first and then Part 1. I kind of was so on Part 1 the first time I saw it. Like, so much of it is just like scene after scene of people standing at attention and bellowing to Paul that he needs to be ready because the planet of Arrakis is going to be so crazy. But the planet and the Fremen people who live there that wind up being our main emotional attachment to the story in 2 aren't really too involved in the main conflict of 1. Part 1 ends with a big ambush from the rival House Harkonnen, who are bad guys in 2 for sure. So it sets them up, but it's between the Harkonnens and Paul's family. So it kind of feels like everyone is fighting over something that I am often told is important to some emperor somewhere who we never even meet until Part 2 anyway. But if you see 2 first, where Paul lives amongst and fights alongside the Fremen people who live in Arrakis for many months, falling in love and mastering the elements, all the events of Part 1 feel more meaningful. I found myself thinking back on events from Part 1 a lot more fondly after seeing 2. And seeing as how it's looking like another Dune is on its way, one which seems to be leading towards a darker turn in Paul's story, Part 1 makes sense to me as a bridge between Part 2 and Part 3. Part 1 traces the darkness inherent in Paul's entitlement to power back further to more concrete origin points. We see how he's been put on this pedestal his whole life in this culture that he loved, which has been destroyed. And I think knowing the culture gets destroyed ahead of time actually makes learning about it more impactful. And even the stiffer performances of Part 1 might feel more, I guess, purposeful and interesting after, when you're able to contrast it with how the Fremen people live. So, I don't know, that's my thought. I'd be curious to hear if anybody sees this and decides to watch the Dunes out of order, what that experience would be like. I know the director of Dune 2 has said he tried to make it so Dune 2 would still be understandable to people who haven't seen 1. I would love to hear that. Like, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe this is kind of like that Star Wars suggestion where, like, you're supposed to watch A New Hope and then Empire Strikes Back and then Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith and then Return of the Jedi. Like, I feel like once the third one comes out, this might be something. That's my thought. Yeah. Doom.